The best thing you can do with environmentalists is shoot them. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. This one, I can feel from the weight of the script that it is a long one, so we're just going to jump in. If you're new here, what happens is Danny writes me a script, I read it and react to it and share my thoughts, and then Sam, the video editor, he adds in some memes afterwards and some music and some cuts, so it looks a little bit more professional than the shambles that it would otherwise be. But it's long, let's jump in. Oh, it's vaguely about business. This one is about epic PR disasters. Let's do it. One of the most infamous, most spectacular public relations gaffes ever to hit the UK headlines concerned Mr. Gerald Ratner back in 1991. This is the dude who ran a jewelry shop and he said that his stuff was basically he was like, it's terrible, I don't know why people buy it, it's a complete rip-off. It didn't go well for him. I assume Danny's about to tell all of us this, so I'm gonna stop talking. One of the most interesting things about it is it was just so utterly unnecessary, and it came right out of the aquamarine. Oh, right out of the blue! Ba-da-bum-bum! Occasionally that happens. This is Business Blaze. If you're new, as I always say, at this point, you're probably wondering, what the f*** is going on? This is Business Blaze. We blaze the business. Gerald Ford had taken on the reins of Ratner's. It doesn't say Gerald Ford, it just says Gerald. I think I recently recorded a video about Gerald Ford. So, yeah. Gerald had taken the reins of Ratner's family business in 1984, transforming a small, low-end jewelry business with just 130 UK stores into a small jewelry business. Danny, it's got 130 stores. It's like, how would you describe my business? F***ing microscopic, Simon. It barely exists. Shifting cheap or high-value jewelry across 2,500 stores and generating annual sales of £1.2 billion. Having earned himself the title the Sultan of Bling, Gerald himself admits that things were going so amazingly well that when a business analyst asked him what could potentially go wrong, he couldn't think of a single feasible response. What a legend. He was wrong. His confidence was misplaced. Spoiler alert. Maybe the question was playing on his mind for a while because just a year or two later, he'd managed to cook up the perfect disastrous scenario. During a private business dinner for the Institute of Directors held at the Royal Albert Hall, fancy, Gerald made a speech to 4,000 attendees, which started off with him boasting about how he'd turned around the fortunes of his family business and was now raking in record profits. But then he threw in a bit of a surprise, self-effacing humor to keep the crowd interested. Dangerous territory. It's like Business Blaze, I feel, is a bit of effacing humor in it. But it's like, if I was running a major corporation, I wouldn't do this. Unless I was Elon Musk, then apparently totally okay. He talked about how Ratner's now sell cut glass sherry decanters, complete with 6 glasses on a silver-plated tray, all for under a fiver. £5. That's insanely cheap. He mentions that people often ask him, how can you sell this for such a low price, Gerald? To which he replied that his usual response was, because it's total crap. Gerald also commented how one of Ratner's high-value earrings was cheaper than a Marks & Spencer's prawn sandwich, but probably wouldn't last as long. Well, at least it's Marks & Spencer's, Gerald. I mean, you could have been like, it's an Asda sandwich. Then it would be Asda prawn sandwiches. Sounds risky, to be honest. The speech went down a storm with the crowd, but his quotes didn't quite have the same chord when they appeared on the first page of a UK newspaper the next day, alongside the headline as Crapners and your U22 karat gold mugs. Very good, newspapers. You can't help feeling just a bit sorry for the Sultan of Bling. He was just trying to raise a chuckle at what he assumed was a private dinner, and it didn't help that tomorrow would be a very slow news day. On a busier day, the newspaper editors wouldn't have been so desperate to inflate a story, and his misguided attempts at humor would probably have just remained buried forever, and then we wouldn't have the joy for this episode, would we, Danny? And everyone at home who is, the level of joy you must be having right now is just high. As it panned out, Ratner's lost £500 million in value overnight, and Gerald was eventually fired from his own family business the following year, after which Ratner's was rebranded as Signet. The phrase "doing a Ratner" has since become shorthand for a mighty slip of the tongue which quickly smashes the public perception of your company into tiny cheap glass shards. I'm recording this just after Elon Musk was like, "Tesla's stock seems overpriced, doesn't it?" On Twitter, it's like, Elon, no, you got fined like $50 million or something a couple of years ago for saying some like that on Twitter. Don't you learn? I know you're mega rich, but 50 million is a lot, right? But there are plenty of other examples of respectable-ish corporations going wildly off script with their PR or seizing control of a potentially damaging situation and somehow making it about 1 billion times worse. Oh my god. I know it's bad, and like, we should all thrive off positivity and joy, but these business places are more enjoyable when we're absolutely ripping into someone, right? At least I find them more enjoyable. Torches of freedom. Cigarettes. Must be cigarettes, right? The father of public relations is a title often attributed to Austrian-American press agent Edward Bernays, who launched his own public relations business in New York in 1923. Of course, public relations has been around in one form or another since ancient times. The building of the Egyptian pyramids can largely be seen as an early exercise in political public relations, hammering the point home that the current leader was top dog. Alright then, but Edward was one of the first pioneers to help define today's understanding of modern public relations practice. Can you imagine if Business Blaze had to go through a PR department? People be like, Simon, we've had a look at the latest Business Blaze and it makes you look stupid and your entire brand is built on being smart. I'd be like, smash that publish button, PR. You're all fired. Simon, that's not going to look good. You're fired! Ho! In the same year that he launched his new business, he also wrote the world's first book on public relations called Crystallizing Public Opinion, which outlined his profession for the first time, and he taught lessons on the subject at New York University. Edward was born in Vienna, but his family moved to the States in the 1890s. He's actually a double nephew of the founder of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. What the is a double nephew? Ooh, is that where they were so incestuous back in the day that you can be a nephew somehow on both sides? Oh my. I'm not going to think about that too much or try and work it out because it's all a weird headache, isn't it? Like, I did a video about ancient Egypt recently. It was like, yeah, somehow it's her husband and she's his wife and mother at the same time and sister or something. And I was like, I'm not even going to try. But you know, it's not right. It took me a while to work out the meaning of a double nephew. Oh, okay, here we go. And whether it, God, Danny and I, same page. And whether it involved incest somewhere along the line, but I think we're on safe ground. Sigmund Freud was the brother of Edward's mum and the husband of Edward's dad's sister. Danny, this is as clear as mud, to be honest. Let's move on. After working as a journalist and press agent, but what we can take away from this is that Sigmund Freud was an incestuous spy. After working as a journalist and press agent, Edward struck major success with his innovative new public relations company in the 1920s, and one of his early notable triumphs was convincing America to eat bacon and eggs for breakfast. Oh, I vaguely know this story. His attention turned to tobacco in 1927 when he was hired by the makers of Chesterfield cigarettes, which are still around today. These companies, it's in 1927, they were killing people, allegedly. Wait, you could definitely say this about tobacco, right? Like, Chesterfield, I'm gonna be like, Simon, it doesn't cause cancer, and we're suing you for saying it does. No, cigarettes in general, definitely not Chesterfield cigarettes. Those things are probably extremely healthy. So cigarette companies have been killing people since 1927. It's nearly 100 years later, and that is still being sold. They wanted to craft a campaign which poked fun at their arch rival Lucky Strike cigarettes. That campaign worked so well that the makers of Lucky Strike promptly poached Edward and got him to work for their side instead. The problem facing tobacco companies in the 1920s is that they were only really targeting half of the population, the men. It's the men. It's definitely the men. It's not the women. Or, yeah. Sales of cigarettes amongst males had soared after the First World War. I haven't researched this bit properly. Come on, Danny. What am I paying you for? But I would guess that that's because after the fighting had stopped for the day, usually about 7 p.m, I would imagine, all the opposing military forces got together down at the nearest pub for a chat over a pint and a cigarette and a pie and peas supper. Alright. Okay, after a bit more digging into the trenches, it turns out that US soldiers were given a cigarettes in their ration packs, so the ones that came back alive were all addicted to nicotine. It's like, thanks for going off to war, here's some free cigarettes. You know, the war didn't kill you, so, well, these might. Eventually, slowly, painfully, uncomfortably. Also, expensive, and they make you smell. Cigarettes. Back in those less enlightened times, women were largely only allowed to smoke in the privacy of their own homes. Allowed. Wait, kind of like today. Like, you can't really smoke in public or in restaurants or shops anymore. Shops. Just like in the supermarket having a cigarette. It's so absurd to us now, but it was so ordinary recently. It wasn't generally seen as very ladylike, and we're still suffering from the signs of social stigma with being exclusively associated with fallen women and prostitutes. What is a fallen woman? I don't know. Edward was paid a fortune, $25,000, which is just under $400,000 in today's money, to open up the Lucky Strike market to women for the first time. And his first strategy was to run a campaign which focused exclusively on thin women lighting up a cancer stick, allegedly. $400,000 doesn't seem like a ton of money to lead a campaign that is essentially going to open up a brand's cigarettes to half of the other half of the world. That seems like a good deal if you can do it. The suggestion seemed to be that you could easily lose weight in no time by replacing meals with cigarettes, which I'm sure is true, but definitely not recommended. Yes, business blaze. I mean, we're not a health channel, I'm not a doctor, I can't give health advice, but don't do that, okay? Then he hit upon what he felt was a much more powerful strategy. After consulting with a student of his uncle Sigmund, he's partly to blame for all of this, Edward came round to the idea that Lucky Strike cigarettes could be seen as torches of freedom, which would symbolize freedom from male oppression. You don't hear them trying to do that today, you know, with the whole like feminism movement and stuff. It's like, how shall we signal that we are free from men? Cigarettes. On the 31st of March 1929, he arranged for a young woman called Bertha Hunt to step out into the packed crowds of Fifth Avenue during the New York City Easter Day Parade and defiantly light up a Lucky Strike. She was then followed down Fifth Avenue by 10 other women, each one of them proudly puffing away on a torch of freedom during a march to liberation. A little bit of irony here, isn't it? That, like, they're being paid to do something that is hurting them while they march to freedom. I'm not sure, but it feels strange. Crucially, Edward had already tipped off the press that this was going to happen, so the next day's newspapers were full of photographs of this shocking scandal that unfolded in full view of hordes of innocent bypassers caught up in the horror. American journalist and feminist Ruth Hale voiced her strong declaration of approval. Women, light another torch of freedom, fight another sex taboo. Wait, how's a cigarette a sex taboo? After the initial outrage had died down a little and people slowly began to accept that women had just as much a right to cough and splutter over a generic cigarette, definitely not a Lucky Strike, than a man, sales of the cigarettes saw a huge jump in the next decade. In fact, it could be argued that this was a glorious PR triumph, and Edward had certainly earned a substantial fee. Before the Torch of Freedom March, only 5% of cigarette purchases were made by women, but eventually this climbed to 33% over the years to come. But was it a hollow victory? I'm not sure how much honor and integrity we can find in shifting millions of packets of death sticks in the name of feminism. Agreed. It would seem even that Edward Bernays himself regretted his actions after the harmful effects of smoking became more widely known. Following his retirement, he devoted much of his time to campaigning on behalf of the anti-smoking lobby. It does seem surprising that people weren't a bit more early into like, well, inhaling this lighting thing of smoke is not... I don't understand, like, that seems like it's just so obviously bad. I guess they didn't know how bad, but it can't be good, right? And although he's now recognized as one of the most influential Americans of the 20th century, Edward didn't seem too keen on how the PR industry evolved over the years, an industry that he helped to define. On his 100th birthday, good for him, I guess he didn't get too many free cigarettes from
generic cigarette company.
In 1991, just 4 years before his death, he commented that public relations today is horrible. Any dope, any nitwit, any idiot can call himself a public relations practitioner. Still, at least he lived to be a ripe old age. I bet he didn't smoke
generic death sticks.
Danny and I, same page. Next up, Topman customers are all hooligans. I don't know if you know, but Topman is like a relatively Topman is a low-end clothing store in the UK. I'm not sure if it even exists. It's been a long time since I've been to one. Here's an entry which could have potentially reached Ratner's level of wreckage, but long-term damage was swiftly curtailed by a more considered follow-up exercise in PR. Topman is a British retailer of men's fashion and a very familiar sight on the high streets of the UK, boasting over 250 stores with 78 stores in the US and about 100 more scattered throughout the world. Although Topman has enjoyed success for over 30 years, it's not actually doing terribly well at the moment, as its parent company, the Arcadia Group, is currently undergoing financial difficulties and scandals which are probably worth a Business Blaze episode of their own. If you think so, dear audience, let me know below and we can maybe get that made up. I don't know. I don't know what this scandal is because I don't really read the news. But the parent group's current dire situation has nothing to do with a surprising interview that Topman's brand director David Shepard gave to the magazine Menswear in 2001. Shepard had played a major part in ramping up the profits of the company during a little slump in the 1990s, and he was asked a simple enough question about why the store had dropped its trademark tight sleeveless t-shirts in favor of a more macho and laddish selection. Now, I'm no brand director of fashion, but I reckon that even I could have had a stab at providing a reasonably logical answer to this one. Following the rise of the Britpop scene, in which bands such as Blur and Oasis had dominated the charts, the UK had witnessed the rise of a new lad subculture. I know Blur and Oasis, and I can imagine how those dudes dressed, but I've never heard of the new lad subculture. That essentially meant that men went through an extended period where they could avoid pretending to be intellectual and sensitive and instead get away with binge drinking and blatant sexism. It's like, look, I'm not a drunk sexist. I'm identified with the new lad culture. Against this emerging new I don't think new lad culture would really fly in 2020. Against this emerging new backdrop, Topman had clearly reevaluated its product lines and moved away from the stiff and smart stuff to cater for the more casual and laid-back laddish trends, like clothes for binge drinking in. And being a sexist. David Shepard revealed to Menswear magazine that his new target customer was the everyday 18-year-old lad. He cares about what he wears, but he doesn't want to stand out. Things may have been fine if he'd left it at that, but the interviewer pushed for deeper clarification, so Shepard came up with football hooligans or whatever. Fitted sleeveless t-shirts were not going to work for beer-swilling lads. Oh yeah, the brand director and you admitted you'll make... Football hooligans don't identify as football hooligans. I assume. It's not going to surprise any of you to learn that I don't really know any. After apparently conceding that his core customers were football hooligans, Shepard went on to explain that Topman no longer gave much floor space to suits. Very few of our customers have to wear suits to work, he said. They'll be for his first interview or court case. Oh, dude, you can't say that anyway. You definitely can't say that if you're the guy selling them the suits, dude. Or the not suits. In the aftermath of the car crash interview, the share price of Topman dropped 1.5%. That's it. I'd sell that so hard. And industry experts noted that the Topman brand would do well to survive this exercise in retail suicide, in which the company was appearing to insult their own customers. Although people do comment that business... Someone left a very upvoted comment the other day, was like Business Blaze, where I come to hopefully learn something, not learn something, and then get insulted. But a spokesperson, although I don't expect you to buy anything except for my merch. Buy my merch. So ironically, also clothes. Oh, I am this guy. Shit. But a spokesperson for the Arcadia Group quickly managed to pull off quite a successful rescue operation when he explained to the press that Shepard was a fun-loving, night-clubbing lad himself and had simply been trying to show an affinity with his customers rather than purposefully offending them. Although he is the brand director of a major company, so is he really? But David Shepard didn't suffer much in the way of negative consequences. He went on to receive a promotion to Chief Operating Officer of the Arcadia Group, of the parent company, a role that he held until 2015 before taking early retirement so that he could spend more quality time down at the football stadium, chucking beer in the faces of unsuspecting pensioners. This is the end of that one. Next up. Oh my god, this is way more serious and dark. The BP oil spill. Some PR exercises are probably a little more straightforward to deal with than others. In the case of the 2010 oil spill disaster at Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico, it's fair to say that the operators BP, British Petroleum, had their work cut out to try and clean up both the figurative and very literal mess. Yes, it was a disaster. I just made an actually serious video about Deepwater Horizon on my other channel, Geographics. Why am I pointing over there? Because that over there, on the other side of the studio, is where I film Geographics. I might link to it below, it might be a rickroll. That's the risk you take when you watch Business Blaze. It wasn't just a case of a mildly embarrassing corporate slip-up in which everyone got a bit of egg on their faces. This was the biggest environmental disaster of all time. It's like, yeah, the previous guy was like, yeah, our customers are kind of hooligans. This is the greatest environmental disaster ever. Feel like we took it up a notch, Danny. The massive explosion at Deepwater Horizon was the resultant spillage of 134 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico killed 11 workers, thousands of marine animals and protected species, closed down fishing and tourism, and destroyed over 12,000 jobs. At least the cleanup created some jobs? Oh, I'm a PR wizard. It'd be like, Simon, as the chief of PR for BP, what do you think of this disaster? Well, obviously, it's very unfortunate that the BP oil disaster has happened and that we have killed thousands of marine animals. But on the plus side, a lot of them are just covered in oil. And we're creating jobs, you know. There are thousands of people out there using toothbrushes on weird birds that we can't identify because they're covered in our oil. It's good for the economy. It's difficult to see where BP could possibly even begin to try and put a positive spin on this one. Obviously it's not, Danny. Job creation. And the truth is they shouldn't even have tried. Probably not. Like, what I just said there was sarcastic. I wouldn't recommend it. This was surely a time for holding up your hands, admitting a disastrous failure, and clearly demonstrating to the world that you're going to try and do everything within your power to fix this. But BP decided to adopt an initial strategy of playing down the severity of the crisis and deflecting the blame. The company claimed to reporters that the oil rig was leaking 1,000 barrels of oil a day, but it was later estimated that the figure was closer to 5,000 barrels of oil a day. Even when this new estimation had been revealed to the public, the best BP could do was revise their original figure to somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000. It's not a lie, is it? It's just 5,000. In fact, it's somewhere between none, there is no disaster, and 5,000 barrels a day leaking into the ocean. Well, you're not lying. In fact, later still it was revealed that the true figure was closer to 62,000 a day. Well, it turns out you were lying, just accidentally. If you lie accidentally, is that still a lie? Allegedly? I don't know. Oh, the company was very keen to remove their name from the disaster, which was usually referred to as the BP oil spill by the likes of President Obama and the Environmental Protection Agency. Aware that this may cause some minor damage to the brand, BP stubbornly insisted on only referring to it as the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. Of course, that's super smart. You wouldn't be like, yeah, our oil spill. BP, that's probably not something you want to claim ownership of. BP also appeared to go out of their way to suggest that they weren't entirely to blame for the disaster. The very first press release on the matter emphasized very strongly that the oil rig itself belonged to drilling contractor Transocean Limited, to whom BP were nobly offering their full support. Again, that is pretty smart, but the press is not stupid. They're going to see through it. If that's the case. There's no doubt that BP held full responsibility for cleaning up the mess, but they were often communicating a message that they were cleaning up somebody else's mess rather than their own. Interesting. And just to be clear on that, Transocean didn't come out of this with flying colors either. The hostile finger-pointing between the two companies continued all the way to congressional testimony, which President Obama would describe as a ridiculous spectacle. It's congressional testimony. Did you really expect it to be anything other than a ridiculous spectacle? Because every time I've watched that, it's like, what's the point? This is just a joke, right?
The explosion and fire aboard the Deepwater Horizon and the resulting oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico never should have happened. And I'm deeply sorry that it did.
The district court would ultimately rule that BP should accept 67% of the blame for the accident, with 30% going to Transocean and a further 3% going to Halliburton, the company responsible for cementing the oil well that sprang a leak. That is remarkably specific. I guess that's to assign damages somehow, I don't know. But it was CEO of BP, Tony Hayward, who perhaps comes out of this the worst. Just prior to the accident, Hayward had slashed BP's public relations operations in a bid to save money.
And I deeply regret that.
It's like, wow, nothing ever goes wrong at BP. Let's just fire everyone in PR the next week. Oh, shit, get them back. And they weren't super motivated. The Blaze. Looking very much in suave CEO mode, he never really cut a sympathetic figure as he strolled up and down the beaches that had been drenched in his company's oil and talked to distraught fishermen whose jobs and livelihoods had been wiped out by the disaster. When he wasn't yelling at journalists to stop taking photographs, he was stressing to the press that his company would only pay for legitimate claims from businesses and residents who had suffered from the crisis. If you don't want to be photographed walking along the oily beach, why are you on the oily beach? You don't have to go there, you're the CEO. It's not going to make me feel better that the CEO of the company comes out and apologizes to me in person. Just pay me. Give me my money. When pushed further on this, he simply responded, "This is America, come on. We're going to have a lot of illegitimate claims, we all know that, dude." However, perhaps Hayward's defining PR blunder was the moment he explained to reporters why he was working so hard to resolve the crisis. "I want my life back," he blurted out. "Oh no, Tony! Cry me a river!" Being generous to Tony Hayward for a moment, I don't blame him at all for having inner thoughts and feelings on how his life appeared to have rapidly turned to shit. But considering the scale of this environmental tragedy, he must surely have known that this was not a good time to bleat to the press about how personally inconvenient he was finding all of this. It's like, dude, people's businesses have been destroyed. People f***ing died. And you're like, oh, it's really a bit of a hassle for me as CEO that I have to deal with all of this shit. I just want to go to expensive lunches with the other executives. F*** off, Tony. Later as the BP oil spill, I hope you get fired. Later as the BP oil spill continued to wreak havoc, Hayward was spotted enjoying a very jolly and public day off from whining to the press to see his expensive boat participate in the JP Morgan round the island yacht race off the Isle of Wight. Oh, dude. President Obama's chief of staff declared that Hayward appeared to have committed yet another in his long line of PR gaffes, while Obama himself commented that Hayward certainly would never be offered a job working for him. He's a CEO of a major company. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to come and work for you. He's certainly going to get paid less if he does. And he cares about money because, I don't know, I feel that, yeah, he's going to do this boat racing thing. While it was a bit of a weird thing to say, I want my life back, we can't, I do feel it's a bit unfair to criticize him for having a day off. Like when the president goes and plays golf and as long as he's not doing it like all the time, I don't feel that we should criticize, like, but there's a war going on. It's like, yeah, but look, we all need a day off because otherwise we're going to be at our work. Tony Hayward resisted the inevitable calls to resign, and a BP press release confirms that he still had the full confidence and backing of the board of directors. Within the space of just a few months, he had been ousted from his position as CEO. So someone didn't. Probably the backlash from him being a bit shit. Although he may have regretted slashing his PR allegedly. Although he may have regretted slashing his PR operations just before the disaster, it's difficult to see how even the strongest PR campaign in the world could have helped BP with this one. The best approach may have been ridiculously and refreshingly simple. Don't even really try. Brace your company for the full force of the shit hitting the fan, accept full responsibility and accountability, and devote every available resource to sorting out the mess, instead of pointing the finger at others and desperately trying to save a reputation which is beyond rescue. Let's just hope that Tony got his life back. The poor chap. Oh, my sympathy for Tony is relatively low, actually, I have to say. It's pretty low. Now the blaze comes to one of my favorite topics. Ryanair, Michael O'Leary. Finally, if you're new here, ripping on Michael O'Leary is a little bit of a business blaze hobby of mine. Finally, we can't have a video about epic PR gaffes without at least giving a brief mention to a certain Mr. Michael O'Leary, one of the wealthiest businessmen in Ireland and the notoriously outspoken CEO of cheap airline Ryanair. Danny has used other words in here to describe Ryanair, which I won't use, but I'll leave up to your personal imagination, especially those of you who have flown with Ryanair. The company has a reputation for delivering exceptional customer service, treating employees in the best possible way, dishing out really minimal excess charges at the drop of a hat, and responding with kindness and thoughtfulness to any criticism of them. It also has a reputation for being incredibly expensive, which is why the airline is essentially a massive success story. The only bit, massive success story, yes. The rest of that, just imagine other words, that might be more positive or perhaps more negative of what I just said. I don't know. I'll leave it up to your imaginations, allegedly. At the risk of taking a digital pelting from Business Blaze viewers, I have to admit that there's a part of me which can't help but admire him in a way. Oh, Danny, you and I are on the same page. Like, Ryanair might be the best airline ever. Again, use your imagination. But Mike, genuinely, not using any weird language here, Michael O'Leary is a pretty exceptional business dude. Make no mistake, he's an arrogant and ruthless guy. And probably one of the last people in the world I'd want to share a pint with, but you have to admire his sheer brutal honesty and the way he makes it abundantly clear that he doesn't give a flying what you might think. Yeah, if Michael O'Leary ever saw this video, he'd be like, I don't give a fuck, I'm rich, bitch, and I've got a massively successful company, and I could buy you, Simon. And Michael, listen, if you want to buy Business Blaze, I'm open to offers, mate. Unlike the greasy CEOs of other companies who invest a lot of time in crafting completely disingenuous communications designed to hit the right tone, Michael O'Leary appears to just say whatever the hell he likes. Like it or lump it. When one customer, Mrs. McLeod, took to social media to complain about Ryanair, she received support from over 500,000 users. McLeod had checked in online and arrived at the airport with 4 members of her family, but hadn't bothered to print out the boarding passes. Alright, look though, you know you have to print out the boarding passes or have it on your phone, and otherwise you're going to have to pay. Everyone knows this, it's just how it works. You can complain all you want, but it's pretty clear what the rules are. And it is to save money, although the fees are insane. I have made this mistake. I didn't like it, but I know I'm in the wrong. And also, if I want a company that's going to print out my boarding pass for me when I get to the airport, look, I could pay more expensive prices for a ticket. This is the first ever Business Blaze where I have defended Ryanair because, complain all you want, it is bloody cheap. She was shocked to discover that Ryanair was charging €60 to print out each piece of paper on her behalf, adding up to a grand total of €300 for a whole family. This kind of online complaint would usually be most likely handled by a company's social media team, but O'Leary decided to give the matter his own personal touch. Good man. He replied, "We think Mrs. McLeod should pay €60 for being so stupid." She wrote to me last week asking for compensation as a gesture of goodwill, to which we have replied politely but firmly, "Thank you, Mrs. McLeod, but it was your cock-up." Yeah, Mrs. McLeod, this sucks, but yeah, he's not wrong, is he? And if they just... I'd like some compensation as a gesture of goodwill. Off. I've recently been watching that TV show Succession. I can imagine the guy, what's his name? The patriarch of the family. He'd just be like, F off. He went on to claim that 99.98% of Ryanair passengers managed to print out their boarding passes in advance. To those who don't, we say quite politely, fuck you. Oh, fuck you, fuck you. Fuck you, fuck you. Yeah. I'm in that 99.98%, 99.98% of the time. After Iceland's, so that volcano that erupted that no one can pronounce in 2010 and briefly disrupted European air travel, some customers were seeking a refund for their cancelled Ryanair flights. I'm sure there's something in the conditions which is like, act of God. And also, get travel insurance. This isn't Ryanair's fault. Also, I've got a Ryanair flight coming up to Morocco in like a week. I'm not going to be getting that flight because now there's coronavirus everywhere and I can't leave the country. You know who I'm not pissed off at? Ryanair. I haven't even tried to get a... To be fair, it's so little money that I just don't care. But if I did care, I wouldn't be pissed off. I wouldn't be. It is what it is. And I have an insurance policy. I'm not going to claim on it because it's a pain in the arse and it's like, I don't know. I don't even remember how expensive it is. O'Leary made his feelings clear on the idea of giving out refunds for a situation beyond his airline's control. You're not getting a refund, so fuck off, he warned customers. We don't want to hear your sob stories. What part of no refund don't you understand? However, European law disagreed with him on this policy, and he did begrudgingly have to cough up those refunds in the end. Or maybe I could get a refund from Ryanair. Who cares? O'Leary it's going to be really difficult. I think that's the thing. Like, the European law might be like, yes, Simon, you're absolutely entitled to a refund. And Ryanair will be like, all right, Simon, hold on. We've got these forms that you have to fill out. So what you need to do, start here, name, address, passport number, Name of first pet. These are the old Business Blaze scripts. There's a lot of them these days, just because they're here. O'Leary was always honest about what a customer should expect from a typical Ryanair flight. And this is the thing, like, he can say all these things and it doesn't matter, because you can say, like, oh, I'm never flying Ryanair again. Michael O'Leary personally, the CEO of a company personally told me to f*** off. But the problem is, next time you want to fly somewhere and you see that it's £30 with Ryanair or £300 with British Airways, guess who you're flying with? Because, you know, money. Anyone who thinks Ryanair flights are some sort of bastion of sanctity where you can contemplate your navel is wrong. We already bombard you with as many in-flight announcements and trolleys as we can. Anyone who looks like they're sleeping, we wake them up to sell them things. And on the prickly subject of larger passengers taking up more room on flights, he has this to say: nobody wants to sit beside a really fat bastard. We have been frankly astonished at the number of customers who don't only want to tax fat people, but torture them. Holy shit, dude. I mean, no comment, alright? Some people might assume that Michael O'Leary is a thoughtless buffoon who needs to hire a proper PR team, but this could just be a case of PR genius. Here's the thing, some customers just want to fly at the cheapest possible prices, end of story, exactly like I said. Danny and I, same page as usual. And every time O'Leary drummed up a scandal in the media with his bizarre rants, the media just ended up reinforcing the message that Ryanair flights were cheap. And here we are. So he seemed to be quite masterfully playing the media like a banjo and harnessing the incredible power of negative publicity. Yes, indeed. Ryanair might have been voted the least liked short-haul airline for 6 years running in surveys conducted by consumer choice platform Which, who also revealed that it had come right at the very bottom of a list of the UK's top 100 companies rated on customer service. But as long as customers felt safe and ticket prices remained low, they were still going to keep on using the appalling service, regardless of O'Leary's latest round of verbal abuse in the press. Or at least that was the story until 2014. Oh, it changed! Facing increased competition from rival no-frills services such as EasyJet, Michael O'Leary appears to have turned over a new leaf. Competition, it's a wonderful thing. He now believes that it is probably not good business practice to unnecessarily piss people off, and he'll be taking a step back from public relations as his company strives to become a bit more customer friendly. It's been 6 years. Are they really? I mean, I haven't heard Michael O'Leary tell you anyone to f*** off lately, but still Ryanair, isn't it? He says, with tongue maybe still very slightly in cheek, "We're listening to you. We're responding to your needs." God help me. He can't even do this properly. It's great. And since then he's gone very quiet indeed. It seems almost a shame in a way, but let's remember the glory days with these bonus Michael O'Leary quotes. "I'm Europe's most underpaid and underappreciated boss. I'm paid about 20 times more than the average Ryanair employee, and I think the gap should be wider." It is his airline, right? So he must be taking a ton of stocks and stuff. Also, yeah, I mean, this whole thing about where it's like, oh, the CEO gets paid 20 times what the lowest employee gets. It's like, of course he does. It's supply and demand. Like if they were like, oh, well, we're only going to pay you about, we're going to pay you double what we pay our lowest paid workers. Who the is going to apply for that job? Definitely no one who went to fucking Wharton, that's for sure. Germans will crawl bollock naked over broken glass to get low fares. Oh, Michael. If drink sales are falling off, we get the pilots to engineer a bit of turbulence. That usually spikes up the drink sales. They definitely don't. That's got to be it. That would definitely not be legal. MBA students come out with, "My staff is my most important asset." Bullshit. Staff is usually your biggest cost. We all employ some lazy bastards who need to kick up the backside, but no one can bring themselves to admit it. The best thing you can do with environmentalists is shoot them. Oh, shit. We want to annoy the f***ers whenever we can. They are Luddites marching us back to the 18th century. Do we carry rich people on our flights? Yes. I flew on one this morning, and I'm very rich. It's f***ing gold. It is absolute gold. Michael O'Leary, you absolute legend. And you, dear viewer, if you've watched this long-ass video right to the end, you are an absolute legend, giving me that watch time. I appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you smashed that like button if you enjoyed this video. I'd appreciate it less if you smashed the dislike button, but as someone pointed out in the comments, turn your phone upside down and then smash the dislike button, because then it looks like a The thumbs up looks like the dislike button. It's complicated. I know. We'll be able to master it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Blaze it.
Turn it up. Every tear from the oh shit. You mind if I praise the Lord? Go ahead.
Smash that publish button, PR.